So in this video you can hear what are the things to love and hate for someone who actually lives here. A lot of people want to move to London. I've been living here for 3 years and there's definitely so much to love and hate about such a big crazy city like London. So let me tell you what I love and hate about living here. Number one, parks. This is number one for me for a very strong reason. I love nature in general and it is bad when you live in a multi-million big city. It's an urban concrete jungle, and having parks on every corner, which London really does have, is something amazing. Parks are usually very well maintained and they offer a lot of content. It really depends on where you go, but as you go further away from the central London, you actually get more family friendly content. Never mind, wherever you actually go, most of the parks are very well decorated and it just offers that, you know, some sort of green sanctuary, green haven in this concrete jungle. Number two, the transport, the public transport. The underground system is just absolutely amazing. You can literally fly over the entire London with it, and it is just extremely superior to any other form of going through London, especially if you want to go through areas where driving is extremely difficult. So being able to, like, if you need to go to work or wherever, you will use the public transport rather than driving. Especially if the more central you go, you literally cannot drive, so you fully depend on that public transport. But just more than that, if you're new to the city and you don't have a car, the fact is you can really live without one. Car, I mean. I know that Londoners will complain, but if you travel to other cities in Europe, the London underground system and the buses are so superior to any other, especially the famous red buses. Who doesn't know though? Number three, jobs and opportunities / networking with people. When it comes to that, I feel like London is number one in the world. The job market itself, no matter what industry you're in, the numbers, the amount of people living here, the businesses that operate here, and also a lot of international companies that are based here or have it doesn't matter what industry you're in, job opportunities wise, London is amazing. It doesn't matter what you're doing or if you're looking to expand your network professionally or in your private life, London offers an insane amount of diversity in every aspect. Number four, obviously this won't matter to people who are born and raised here, but for every immigrant like myself, this is very important. London is a very immigrant-friendly city. Most of the people I meet are also immigrants. Some areas you have a higher percentage of people who came here recently, in some other areas not as much. But no matter where you go, it is very friendly towards all kinds of tourists or immigrants, or no matter where you're from, you could most likely find other people who came from the same background or country or whatever, and there is just a lot of support for people who are coming here for the first time, which you'll be surprised in today's age when you don't expect racism or whatever. In other places in the world, that's not the case. UK people in general, in my opinion, don't get the credit they deserve when it comes to how they welcome people from the outside, and London is probably the best I've heard of when it comes to that. Number five, which is kind of vague, broad, but I really feel like it deserves as a description for London. Everything exists here, everything happens here. So it doesn't matter if you're looking for a specific shop and you want to buy something, or even when it comes to stuff like food, you can find anything and everything here. So even if you are just a tourist, or if you come to live here, or if you've been here your whole life, you will always have something new to see. No matter what's happening, if it's relevant in the world, there is a part of that happening here as well. Just the amount of people and the circulation of everything business-wise and anything basically you can think of, it will happen here. That is absolutely amazing, and it just gives you an opportunity to live a life very rich of experiences of whatever you choose to pursue. So that was a quick rundown of 5 things I love about London. So now we go to the bad stuff, which definitely exists. Alright, cons. Number one, I have to be honest, when I was actually doing my number 5 positive things, I kind of struggled to find them. I didn't expect that to be the case, but for example, when I decided to write a script for this video, I wrote the negative, the cons first, and I wrote that in 45 seconds, literally. Just kind of like the notes about what I want to mention. And when it came to positive stuff, the pros, I'm not saying there isn't an abundance of it, but categorically, it wasn't as easy as thinking of the bad stuff. So just to get that out of the way, that's my first thing on the list. The fact that it was so much easier to think of the bad stuff rather than the positives. Which doesn't mean that there isn't an abundance of positive stuff, it just means that the bad stuff that does exist, I feel like it kind of trumps the good stuff very often. Even more so if you live in a dodgy area. Definitely keep that in mind if you decide to move here. Number two, something that I really hate about London: segregation. It's just full of ghettos. So you can go to a certain area and you will just have a group of one type of people based on, for example, either religion or ethnicity. This might necessarily be true, but for example, when I came here, you just feel like an outsider already because you're new to the country, and this just adds a whole new feeling of, you know, feeling like an outsider. And I genuinely struggled sometimes to kind of fully get used to the area where I was living, or just to kind of assimilate in an area where you have a strong presence of one group that kind of chooses to stay within themselves. So you go to East London, everything is one way. You go to South London, everything is different, but still you are the outsider if you don't belong to that group. For example, if you don't come from the same country as them or something like that. There is a feeling of like I'm not saying that's the case, I'm not saying there is a specific group that doesn't like the other group or whatever, but that's the feeling you get as an outsider when you come to London. You get a feeling of like, you know, these people, they don't want to be next to each other, so this is how they operate. I hate that. Number 3, a very obvious one for a big city as London: the traffic jams and pollution. So the traffic jams, it can just be, I can't find a word to describe it, to say bad or impossible or whatever. It's an understatement, because you can get to a point where you're not driving, you're just existing in traffic. That's all that you are. So obviously this is when most of the people go to work, let's say, I don't know, 8:30 or 9, and also when people are going to their homes from work. So your typical hours of like 4, 5 p.m, I don't know, but it can just get ridiculous. Obviously this is an issue with all the bigger cities in the world, and what can you do? It's part and parcel of living in a big city, but still a complete nightmare when you get stuck. And the pollution, obviously another thing that's kind of, you just can't escape it. It can get also bad, it depends on areas and where you live, whatnot, and do you have any kind of, you know, green stuff around you, but yeah, pollution is quite bad. Number 4, unless you're rich, most likely you will end up in a completely dodgy area or like semi-dodgy area. It depends, but London is completely unaffordable for people who are not rich when it comes to really nice, pristine neighborhoods. So immediately, if you're just a normal person, you can forget that you will be living in one of those areas. It does vary where you go in London, but there is a lot of dodgy neighborhoods and very dodgy people. So for example, a friend of mine who is a paramedic, he should be able to afford a decent housing situation, right? You'd feel like that. But the fact is, for example, he lived like for a year in Leighton, basically East London. And I remember when I met him, I was still kind of new to the UK, and he was telling me about his experiences of like his car got stolen, he got attacked a couple of times, someone from his family got mugged. Like, it was like a lot of bad stuff. And still, in my opinion, he was paying a fortune for that flat. He was paying like 1,400 quid. That's way too much to feel like you're living in the middle of a war zone. So another big issue, which is connected to the 5th negative thing about London, it's unreal pricing for a lot of things, but mostly accommodation. Just by working, you'd expect you'll be able to cover the expenses for rent and, you know, bills, food. That's not the case in London. Most likely you will need to rely on at least someone else bringing in another set of wages. If not, you can afford a room. You won't be able to afford a flat, let alone to even think of that flat being in a non-dodgy area. Forget about it. So just like an average person who doesn't have the best of jobs is looking at being able to rent a single room in a house with like 5, 6 other people, literally. This is how I got started in London, and also in a dodgy area. So single room, house full of people you don't know and you have to share it with, and then also a dodgy area. This is a nightmare, in my opinion. Like, I went through that. I'd never go through that again. It was just, oh my god, it was horrible. That's my 5 things I love and hate about London. If you got the time, have a look around the channel. I post a lot of different things, and I hope I see you next time.